Tom Holland's Spider-Man began as the answer to a studio partnership that once seemed impossible. His Peter entered an existing Marvel Cinematic Universe, met the Avengers before receiving a solo origin film, inherited advanced technology, and then gradually lost every external support. This rebuilt video follows the 2015 Sony Marvel agreement, Holland's casting and screen tests, the retroactive Iron Man 2 Stark Expo connection, Civil War, Homecoming's high school approach, Vulture, the Stark suit, Infinity War, the Blip, Far From Home, Mysterio's illusions, the public Sony Disney, split of 2019, the restored agreement, No Way Home's pandemic-era production, the three Spider-Men, Peter's erased identity, and the handmade suit at the ending. It finishes with a spoiler-controlled look at Spider-Man, Brand New Day, officially scheduled for July 31, 2026. Together, these chapters trace how Tom Holland's Peter Parker evolved from an eager young hero living in Iron Man's shadow into a more independent Spider-Man prepared to build his future without the support systems that once defined him. On February 9, 2015, Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios announced a new collaboration. The next Spider-Man would first appear in a Marvel Cinematic Universe film, and Sony would then release a new solo movie co-produced by Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal. The agreement did not transfer Spider-Man ownership to Disney. Sony stated that it would continue to finance, distribute, own, and retain final creative control of the Spider-Man films. Marvel's involvement created continuity with the MCU and opened the door for other Marvel characters to enter Peter's solo stories. This arrangement replaced the planned continuation of Andrew Garfield's series with another creative reset. It also created a Spider-Man whose life would be shaped from the beginning by heroes, battles, and technologies that already existed on screen. Sony and Marvel announced Tom Holland and director Jon Watts on June 23, 2015. The official statement described a worldwide casting search and a series of complex screen tests. Holland was already known for the impossible and had training in dance and gymnastics, giving him unusual physical control for a young actor expected to move like Spider-Man. The studios tested not only whether he could play Peter, but whether he could fit naturally beside established MCU performers. Jon Watts came from the smaller thriller Cop Car rather than a previous giant franchise. That combination, a young actor with physical ability and a director associated with children navigating danger, supported a version of Peter who could feel genuinely adolescent inside a world of adult superheroes. Before Tom Holland appeared in Captain America: Civil War, fans noticed a possible earlier Peter Parker hiding inside Iron Man 2. During the Stark Expo battle, a young boy wearing a toy Iron Man mask stands in front of a hammer drone and raises his hand as if he can stop it. Tony Stark destroys the drone, tells the child he did a good job, and flies away. The boy was played by Max Favreau, the son of director Jon Favreau, and the 2010 film never names him as Peter. Years later, the timing, Queen's location, and Peter's fascination with science inspired a popular fan theory. In 2017, Tom Holland publicly said the child was Peter and said he had just discussed the idea with Kevin Feige. Jon Watts also described suggesting the retroactive connection to Feige. Holland later clarified that Feige had not explicitly confirmed it in that conversation and that he had enthusiastically adopted the idea himself. The most accurate description is therefore a playful, retroactive interpretation supported by Holland and the filmmakers, not something planned when Iron Man 2 was made or identified on screen. It still gives Tom's Peter a memorable symbolic beginning. As a child, he tried to stand like Iron Man years before Tony Stark recruited him. Captain America: Civil War introduced Tom Holland's Peter after he had already been Spider-Man for several months. The film skips the spider bite, Uncle Ben's death, and the construction of the first costume. Instead, Tony Stark arrives at the Parker apartment, recognizes Peter's homemade technology, and recruits him for the airport confrontation. This approach trusts the audience to know the basic origin while revealing character through conversation. Peter wants to help the little person, is overwhelmed by meeting the Avengers and still behaves like a teenager who has been taken somewhere far beyond his normal experience. The airport sequence then demonstrates his strength, agility, humor, and inexperience in a single extended set piece. By beginning inside another hero's movie, Tom Spider-Man immediately feels connected, but also dependent on a world much larger than himself. Spider-Man: Homecoming was designed as a high school movie inside a superhero universe. John Watts and the filmmakers often cited the influence of John Hughes' academic teams, awkward parties, detention, hallway gossip, and the fear of disappointing adults. Peter believes the airport battle has prepared him for Avengers-level work, but most of his actual life is smaller. He misses school obligations, lies to Aunt May, abandons friends, and repeatedly misjudges what kind of danger he is ready to handle. The film's title refers both to the school dance and to Spider-Man, returning to Marvel's shared movie world. Its smartest decision is refusing to make ordinary life irrelevant. The superhero plot becomes more meaningful because Peter has classmates, a best friend, and a dance he genuinely wants to attend. Homecoming connects its villain to the aftermath of the Avengers. Adrian Toomes and his salvage crew begin cleaning alien debris after the Battle of New York, only to lose the contract when a government agency connected to Tony Stark takes control. Toomes responds by keeping alien technology, building weapons, and creating a criminal business. The Vulture therefore emerges from the economic underside of the MCU. Superhero battles leave wreckage, contracts, and workers behind. Michael Keaton plays Toomes as a dangerous man who also understands ordinary responsibility, making the car ride before the school dance especially tense. Peter discovers that the villain is Liz's father at the exact moment he is trying to experience a normal milestone. The reveal fuses the school movie and the superhero plot into one problem. Tony Stark's Spider-Man suit gives Peter expressive lenses, multiple web modes, a tracker, an artificial intelligence voice, and a hidden training wheels protocol. The technology is entertaining, but it also creates the central danger of Tom Holland's first solo film. Peter begins confusing equipment and adult approval with heroism. When Tony removes the suit, Peter is forced back into the homemade costume he wore before Civil War. The ferry disaster has shown that good intentions and advanced tools do not equal judgment. Peter then confronts Vulture without the polished system he believed made him legitimate. This does not erase the importance of Tony's help, but it restores the idea that Spider-Man existed before the invitation. The lesson is completed when Peter later refuses Avengers membership and chooses to remain closer to home. Avengers: Infinity War pushes Peter from neighborhood hero to cosmic combatant in minutes. He follows an alien ship above New York, nearly suffocates at high altitude, and receives the Iron Spider armor that Tony had offered him at the end of Homecoming. The suit allows him to survive in space and adds mechanical spider legs, but the scale of the conflict leaves him far outside any normal preparation. On Titan, Peter helps the Avengers and Guardians attempt to remove the Infinity Gauntlet from Thanos. His strategy and quick thinking matter, yet the heroes still fail. When Thanos completes the snap, Peter is among those who disappear. The scene is especially painful because his spider sense appears to warn him before the others understand what is happening, extending his fear and Tony's helplessness. Peter disappears for 5 years from the perspective of the surviving world, although the vanished experience the interval as almost no time. In Avengers: Endgame, he returns through Doctor Strange's portals and rejoins the battle against Thanos. The victory restores the vanished population, but Tony Stark dies using the Infinity Stones. Peter loses a mentor, the world loses its most public hero, and the MCU moves into a period of grief and uncertainty. This loss becomes the emotional background of Far From Home. It also changes the meaning of Tony's influence. Peter is no longer trying to impress a living adult who can correct him. He is surrounded by technology, expectations, and people projecting Tony's legacy onto him. The connected universe gives Peter extraordinary relationships, but it also ensures that his adolescence is repeatedly interrupted by global trauma. Spider-Man: Far From Home turns Peter's school trip into a journey through Europe while the world is still adjusting to the blip. The production moved through locations including Venice, Prague, and London, using the travel structure to take Spider-Man away from the neighborhood he understands. Peter wants to tell MJ how he feels, but Nick Fury, the elemental attacks, and Quentin Beck repeatedly pull him into a role he does not want. The film's title describes geographic distance, emotional displacement, and Peter's uncertainty about home after Tony's death. It also allows the filmmakers to combine location photography with large digital destruction sequences. The trip begins as an attempt to step away from Spider-Man and becomes proof that Peter cannot solve responsibility by simply leaving the suit behind. Quentin Beck presents himself as a hero from another Earth using the language of the multiverse before the MCU publicly confirms that a real multiverse exists. His story succeeds because Peter wants an older hero who appears to understand pressure without carrying Tony's personal history. Behind the performance is a team of former Stark employees combining drones, projection technology, motion capture, practical environments, and digital effects. The illusion sequence after Peter discovers the truth is one of the trilogy's most ambitious visual passages. Reality changes faster than Peter can evaluate it. Mirrors, crowds, buildings, corpses, and the Spider-Man identity become weapons. The sequence is not only spectacle, it dramatizes the central weakness Beck has identified, Peter's need to trust someone else with the burden of deciding what is real. Far From Home ends by reversing one of Spider-Man's most stable protections. Mysterio's edited video frames Spider-Man for the London attack, and J. Jonah Jameson broadcasts Peter Parker's identity to the world. The reveal transforms a private teenage problem into a global media event. Peter can no longer separate home, school, romance, and superhero work. It also creates the opening crisis of No Way Home, where legal investigations, public hostility, supporters, cameras, and online argument surround every relationship he has. The decision is especially significant because Tom Holland's version had already been unusually connected to public heroes and advanced systems. Removing anonymity exposes the cost of that connection. The public does not need to understand the full truth. It only needs an image, a headline, and a story that travels faster than Peter can respond. In August 2019, shortly after Far From Home became a major success, negotiations between Sony and Disney broke down publicly. For several weeks, the future of Tom Holland's Spider-Man inside the MCU appeared uncertain. The dispute involved financing, profit participation, and the terms of Marvel Studios' involvement. Public reaction often reduced the situation to a fight over ownership. But Sony already controlled the movie rights, and Disney did not simply lose a character it owned outright. The problem was whether the unusual collaboration would continue. The timing made the uncertainty especially disruptive because Far From Home had ended with Peter's identity exposed. A story designed as a cliffhanger now existed beside a real-world question about whether the next movie could use the same connected universe. Sony and Disney reached a new agreement in September 2019, allowing Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige to participate in another Spider-Man film and permitting Holland's Peter to appear in an additional MCU project. Reports later said Tom Holland personally contacted senior figures at both companies and urged them to continue talking. He did not negotiate the corporate contract himself, but his intervention became part of the story because he understood how important the shared continuity was to audiences and to his version of Peter. The restored deal allowed No Way Home to use Doctor Strange, the consequences of the Avengers films and the larger multiverse. It also demonstrated that this Spider-Man's continuity depends on ongoing cooperation between companies with different interests. No Way Home entered production during the COVID-19 pandemic, requiring health protocols, controlled work, and schedule adjustments on a movie already carrying enormous secrecy. The filmmakers were bringing back performers and characters from earlier Spider-Man continuities while trying to prevent the central surprise from becoming official before release. Cast members denied or avoided questions. Images circulated online, and public speculation became part of the film's marketing environment even when the studio said little. The production challenge was therefore both physical and informational. Scenes had to combine actors, effects, legacy costumes, and large digital environments while the real world limited ordinary filmmaking. The finished movie became a theatrical event partly because audiences understood how unusual it was to see multiple eras assembled at that moment. No Way Home begins with Peter asking Doctor Strange to make the world forget his identity. Peter repeatedly changes the spell because he cannot accept losing every personal connection, and the damaged magic pulls people from other universes who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. The returning villains are not identical to their earlier final moments. The story gives Norman Osborn, Dr. Octopus, Electro, Sandman, and the Lizard new interactions and, in several cases, the possibility of being cured. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield then arrive not as replacements for Tom, but as older versions who understand different forms of loss. Their presence changes the film from a crossover into a conversation about what Spider-Man becomes after tragedy. Tom Holland's Peter does not receive the familiar responsibility lesson in his first appearance. The idea is present in his explanation to Tony Stark, but the trilogy delays its most explicit form until No Way Home. Aunt May believes the displaced villains should be helped rather than sent back to die. Peter follows her moral direction, and Norman Osborn's Green Goblin persona turns that effort into catastrophe. May dies after the apartment battle, but she uses her final moments to affirm that helping was still the right choice. The scene transforms responsibility from a phrase Peter inherited before the audience met him into a principle he watches someone live and die by. It also drives him toward revenge, making the older Peters necessary not to teach him grief, but to stop grief from deciding what he becomes. The final spell does not merely restore Spider-Man's secret identity. It removes Peter Parker from the memories of everyone who knew him, including MJ, Ned, and Happy. Peter survives physically but loses the social world that defined his MCU life. When he later visits MJ and Ned, he chooses not to reintroduce himself after seeing signs that they are rebuilding their lives. That decision is protective, but it is also lonely and open to future consequences. Peter moves into a small apartment, studies for a high school equivalency exam, listens to police activity, and makes a new red and blue suit himself. The trilogy ends by removing Stark technology, Avengers access, institutional support, and personal recognition. The most connected live-action Spider-Man becomes the one with the fewest connections. Spider-Man: Brand New Day is officially scheduled to open in theaters on July 31, 2026. Marvel's official page lists Tom Holland, Zendaya, Sadie Sink, Jacob Batalon, John Bernthal, Tremel Tillman, Michael Mando, and Mark Ruffalo among the cast, and Destin Daniel Cretton directs. This video was prepared before the public release, so this chapter avoids leaked plot details, unverified character identities, and ending spoilers. The reliable starting point is the position created by No Way Home. Peter is alive, anonymous, and rebuilding Spider-Man without the personal network that previously defined him. The title suggests renewal, but official marketing, not rumor accounts, should determine what can be stated as fact. After the film opens, Kira World can make a separate spoiler review rather than contaminating this legacy video with speculation days before release. Spider-Man speculation expands quickly because Tom Holland's Peter exists between Sony's franchise and the MCU. Claims about Avengers appearances, Secret Wars, additional Spider-Men, Miles Morales, Venom, or another trilogy may be plausible without being officially announced in the form fans repeat online. This video therefore separates three categories. Brand New Day's date, director, and listed cast are confirmed by official Marvel material. Past appearances can be documented from released films. Future crossovers remain unconfirmed until a studio places them on a schedule or names the performer and project. The same rule that protected the Andrew Garfield section from turning leaked ideas into facts applies here. Excitement is allowed. Certainty has to be earned. Before Brand New Day opens, Tom Holland's Spider-Man already has the longest network of live-action connections of the three modern Peters. He has fought beside Avengers, traveled to space, vanished in the Blip, inherited and rejected Stark technology, faced villains from three universes, and chosen to let everyone forget him. His story also depends on an unusual real-world structure. Sony owns and releases the solo films, while Marvel Studios provides major creative and continuity collaboration. That partnership nearly broke and then returned. The character's most important movement is therefore from connection towards self-reliance. Civil War begins with an invitation into a larger world. No Way Home ends with Peter alone at a sewing machine. Brand New Day will determine what he builds from that loss. The legacy is not complete, but the first trilogy has already transformed an MCU guest appearance into a distinct Spider-Man life.